This section of notes, we're going to take it pretty slow. We're going to be looking at the models of urban systems, and we're only actually going to look at two. Normally we kind of push through and go through a lot more, but we're going to look at the rank size rule, and we're going to look at Christaller's central place theory. We're going to take it slow, and we're only going to look at those two. So I'm trying to stress to you the importance of these two models of the urban systems. And part of that also goes into the fact that we're going to be going through several more models in this unit. So we're going to take it slow. We're going to look at two models. Number 8, models of urban systems. There's two theories of settlement geography, which is referring to the patterns of settlement on the Earth's surface. These are the rank size rule and Christaller's place theory. First one I want to look at is the rank size rule. It tells us that the nth largest city will be 1/nth the size of the largest city. Okay, it sounds confusing, but it's just like in math when you take the word x. So the xth largest city will be 1x the size of the largest city. So let's say the second, for example, largest city, according to the rank size rule, will be half the size of the largest city. You could take that 2, put it in the place of that x. Hopefully that kind of clears it up. The rank size rule is a tool used by geographers, but could also be considered a tool of applied mathematics because it's a mathematical formulation. And again, as an example, the second largest city will be a half the size of the first ranked city. The fifth will be a fifth of the size. This works well in urban areas with complex economies like the United States, but it does not work well with many recently or less developed countries. In some countries, like the less developed and the newly industrialized countries, the primate city is so dominant that no other city fits the rank size rule because of the actual dominance of the primate city. This often also reflects the distribution of wealth. If urban hierarchy exists, according to the rank size rule, it often means that economic goods and services are spread throughout the countryside, and inequalities between rural and urban living standards are lessened because it's all going down to the rank. In contrast, countries that do have primate cities have large gaps between standards of living in the city and in the countryside. This graph in the top left corner kind of gives you a visual of what the rank size rule looks like. If city A is 10 million, according to rank size rule, city B would be 5 million, city C 2.5, city D 1. Now, the graph on your bottom right may look confusing, but it's actually pretty simple. First ranked city, 10 million. Second ranked city, about 5 million. Third ranked goes down from there. 2.5, fourth, 1.5, and so forth. You can see that there according to the rank size rule. Again, this is assuming a perfect model, just like all the other models are. Now moving on to the second settlement geography model. That is the central place theory. The central place theory views urban settlements as centers for the distribution of economic goods and services to the surrounding non-urban population. The theory is based on the work of Walter Christaller in a 1933 book entitled The Central Places in Southern Germany. His theory provided a model for settlement patterns that assumed that the following things took place. Number 1, that there was no topographical barriers. There were no physical features that hindered movement. Number 2, there was no difference in farm productivity. All the farms produced the same. Number 3, there was an evenly dispersed farm population around every city. Number 4, people with similar lifestyles and similar incomes existed in these models. Number 5, differing thresholds, or the minimum number of consumers necessary to support different products. That each one of these clusters had the minimum number of consumers necessary. Then the next, this is not another one. Lower thresholds for inexpensive items and higher thresholds for expensive items. That goes with the differing thresholds. It says there's not as many needs for the inexpensive items as there is the higher threshold of the higher expensive items. Then lastly, purchased of goods and services at the nearest center. Means that people are going to always go to the nearest center, the nearest civilization point, to purchase their good. He made these assumptions to develop a consistent model. His results have formed the basis of central place theory ever since. His theory states, number one, the landscape is divided into non-competing areas known as complementary regions, where each individual urban center and its merchants have a sales monopoly over the region around it. Number two, the market areas form a series of hexagons, and you can see that in your visuals there. These hexagons cover the area with no area unserved and no area with equal service from two different centers. Number three, the central place is at the center of each hexagon, and it will supply all the goods and services to consumers in that area. Number four, the size of the market area of a central place is based on the number of goods and services offered. The larger the number of goods and services, the larger the market area is going to be. And number five, within each hexagon, or around its edges, lie smaller hexagons, with central places that serve smaller areas. This nesting of small hexagons within larger hexagons creates a hierarchy of central places, with small centers providing lower order services than the larger centers do. The small centers may provide goods with low thresholds like bread, milk, and other basic foodstuffs, and the larger centers provide more expensive goods like automobiles or farm machinery. So this is a look at one type of scale of the central place theory, and then if you zoomed into each one of these, basically the theory states that there's even more that look similar. This is just like your urban hierarchy. It is the hierarchy of central places. You can see in the bottom right, which is the same visual on the top left, but it has some other things. The conurbation, or the major metropolis, is going to be the one in the red. You can see that in the bottom right. Your cities are going to be the ones in green, and your towns are going to be the ones in red, or black, color blind there. And your villages are the ones that are in blue. And so it's basically taking these hexagons and saying that this fits every city or every settlement. There's two important conclusions that we need to get from Christaller's central place theory. Number one, towns of the same size are evenly spaced because they are in the center of like-sized market areas. Larger towns will be further apart than smaller towns because their market areas are larger. And the example of this, you look in the bottom left with your green dots. Your green cities, the ones that are cities, are spaced farther apart than your black ones are, which are your towns. The towns, you can see, are closer together. And you can see the hexagons that they are forming. And then your villages are even closer together because the markets are not as big. They don't need as big as markets. Second conclusion. Towns are part of an independent system. If a central place is eliminated, the entire system readjusts, altering the spatial pattern to meet the needs and demands of the inhabitants. A smaller town might grow to be larger, or a new town might appear, but changing one hexagon will automatically alter the arrangement of all the others because customers will be willing to travel. In other words, if something happened to one of these cities in the bottom right, then these towns would then just shift to make it look like the distance between these cities because the people will still be there and they'll still need the market. All right, hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Looking at these two different types of urban systems models. Easy way to separate these apart. Number one, your rank size rule is just like the name says. You're going to be ranking different cities based off of their size. And it's in that mathematical principle that you can associate the rank of the city with its rank, or the size of the city as well with its size. If it's the first ranked city, it'll be the first on your formula. If it's the second, it'll be 1/2. Same thing with the size. Then you move on to Christaller central place theory. Think of this one as your hexagons, and within each hexagon there's even more hexagons, and if you take a city out of that hexagon, then the hexagon shifts. I know it sounds confusing, but mathematical principle, hexagons, I think we're good.